Welcome along to the podcast. Today's guest is Mr. Ross Mercer. And Ross has been a musician, a venue manager, and everything in between. An agent, a PA owner.
Lots of different things, yes.
So many different things. So let's start out at the very beginning. Whereabouts did you grow up and what got you into music?
Well, I grew up in a town called Gunnedah out in western New South Wales, and I joined a local brass band as a drummer. They needed drummers. I didn't necessarily want to play drums, but they said, "Oh, here's a snare drum, and you're going to be a drummer with the band." And my brother was in the brass band, and a few other friends. And
your brother Steve?
Yeah.
Played sax?
That's right. And Leon Delander, which you've met Leon, of course, and he was in the brass band too, and a lot of people. In fact, that band's won some international contests.
Oh, wow.
It's actually a very good band. And we won a lot of contests in the day too, it was national contests. It was had some very good conductor and the head musicians and stuff like that. Very good players. So that's sort of where it began. And of course, that sort of led into garage bands, playing, with a bunch of mates and just doing school socials and dances and parties. And there was a band coming to town, playing at the town hall. And they were looking for a support band, and we got the gig. And they were called AC/DC.
Oh,
and
wow.
they were just an up-and-coming band, I suppose.
In the early 70s?
In the early 70s. And I saw these guys play, and particularly Bon Scott, and just said, that's what I want to do. So, and then I pursued that sort of line, even moved to Sydney to
How old were you when you moved to Sydney?
17.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started pretty much playing live probably the age of 15. Diverse in respect because I played in a garage band, and although I still played with the brass band, I also played in old time bands.
Oh.
And there was a very good reason for that, because back in the 70s I used to get paid $90 a night to do a gig with an old time band.
Which back then was a lot of money.
That was
I remember because I started
certainly more than I got paid as I was a panel beater.
like $90 a night. I in the early 80s started as an apprentice, and I was getting paid $90 a week.
I was getting paid $36 a week as an apprentice panel beater, and I used to get $90 a night to play in this old time band.
Yeah.
Sometimes 2 nights a week.
In today's dollars, that'd be the equivalent of what, getting $1,000 a night?
Yeah, probably 500 to $1,000 a night, and I was a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And my parents couldn't believe it, because they always just thought, what a waste of time. Although I will say that my aunties were all great singers, and my grandfather was an Irish fiddler. He used to play old-time music and in all the local halls.
Is this in Gunnedah?
Yes.
I can't imagine that there would be a lot of opportunity to be playing gigs in Gunnedah.
No, it was quite the opposite. In fact, it was not just Gunnedah, but we used to, once we got the bands sorted out, we would go and play in Wee Waa and Narrabri and Coonabarabran and...
Because they were in a close vicinity?
Well, all those towns were generally within a 60 to 80k limit, because in those days the towns were created by the Cobb and Co coaches. Virtually most towns were set up so you could reach them in a day's travel.
Yep.
And to diversify, and that's how the old intending, the bona fide traveller. Do you remember you could only have a drink on Sunday if you were travelling, so you could only drink if you were driving, because that's how it came to pass. You were travelling. It started out horse and buggy.
Yeah.
And people would pull over and they could have a beer and a drink because they had to wash the trail dust down, and even the old cars, they weren't very dustproof. But there was B&S balls. There was there was always lots of opportunities, and the old time dances were regular things. So I would travel with the band to little towns like Wee Waa and certainly play little country halls in the little towns, and these are little villages, Werris Creek and places like that.
I guess the other thing to think about being back then, that was people's form of entertainment.
That's all there
Because
was.
I mean, we had TV, but there was only 2 channels. There was the ABC
channels.
and a commercial channel.
That's right.
I guess the picture theatre.
There was the movies, yeah.
And that was pretty much it.
That was it. And the old time dance was very popular, especially, and it still is to today. You only have to go to Twin Towns to see that, but people still do I call it the big step. But it was what was referred to as strict time. So I had to play strict time, and I could pretty much do that simply because of the brass band, because everything we did we read in the brass band, which helped me down the track when I got into cabaret. However, playing strict time, I remember the guitarist or the piano player, son, he said, we don't get innovative, we don't do anything, but we play as the worst you can, he said, I think it was. And it was really just 3/4, 2/4, gay Maxinas, Canadian 3-steps, barn dances, and they all had a strict time. And as the dancers would dance around, they'd actually, if you were going too fast, they'd actually lean back and look at you, which meant to say you need to slow down a little bit. Or
So I guess it was very good for learning discipline.
oh yeah, it was very good for discipline. Both the brass band and playing old time music was very good for discipline. And in order to learn this stuff, I actually started doing the dancing myself. So for 2 years, I did ballroom dancing with my sister and stuff like that, and which was actually a nice way of meeting girls.
Just a quick interruption to say thank you for watching the podcast. Please hit the subscribe button. It's very early days for us and we're trying to grow things, and you can help. Please share, hit the subscribe button. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much.
And then, of course, I then moved into the clubs, because the clubs had resident bands. You know, there's the band used to play Friday, Saturday night at the club, and it was good money, you know, like in those days. So you could, in fact, you were making more money playing in the band than you were in your day job, and that was great.
So that's in Canada.
That's right. And then I thought, okay,
So you moved to Sydney?
Moved to Sydney, played around Sydney with a few bands. And
Did you have a reason for moving to Sydney? Was there work already lined up?
I wanted to be a pop star.
Ah.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to have a crack at become a rock star, I guess. After that experience with AC/DC, and then there was other bands that came through, Hush and a few other bands and that sort of stuff. I moved to Sydney and played in some bands, and it wasn't terribly successful, but I was still fairly young at the time. But I used to go to venues like the Bondi Lifesaver and the Backstage Room and stuff like that. And the bands that used to play there in those days was Mississippi turned into Little River Band. That was the early days of Midnight Oil and Rose Tattoo and Cold Chisel and, of course, AC/DC and a lot of the other bands that were around at the time. And the bands that were in the circuit in Sydney were just phenomenal bands, like the energy levels and the music that was coming out of the country. And I guess I learnt my craft. I was fortunate enough to be able to support a lot of these bands over the years, and you know, of course I got to know the guys on a reasonable, few of the guys on a reasonable level. Ended up working with a few of them down the track, but as things changed. But it was a great experience. Unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say fortunately. Then I was offered a job in Tamworth. And in Tamworth in those days, Tamworth was kind of like the big smoke of the northern New South Wales Western country town. And it was a residency job, which was 5 nights a week.
Oh, well.
So we were playing in the club 5 nights a week, but it also meant that we had to back artists. So they would always have an act that would come up Friday and Saturday night, and that would be Normie Rowe, Debbie Byrne, Carter Edwards, whoever was on the circuit at the time, lots of different people.
So you had to read.
So we had to be able to read. And because of my experience with the brass band, I could read.
Yep.
So, and then of course, but they were only playing, most of them were playing standards anyway. But I got so proficient at it, I could actually cold read an act. They used to love to come in and always have a rehearsal in the afternoon and run through the charts. And, you know, they were all Bill Barlow and Dick Buchanan charts. You know, they were all the same charts with some minor modifications. And we used to sort of resent the fact that we'd have to come in of an afternoon and run through with the act because that used to cut into our drinking time. So the bass player could kind of play drums, and I could kind of plug away on the bass. So this act came in one afternoon, he insisted on a run through, so I grabbed the bass and he got on the drum kit. And it was just a schmozzle, you know, and you plunk, he's going clank, boom, boom. And the guy's face, he I forget who it was. It was I don't think it was Ray Burton. We certainly wouldn't have done that to him, but it was one of these sort of what we considered to be a B-grade cabaret act. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he's just absolutely gone white, and he's gone, oh, and you could see he's thinking, so this is going to be good tonight. So he's turned up, it's show time, you know, we've counted him in 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's come on stage and he's looked around, he's gone, oh, you and, you know, we've rocked it, you know, because we were actually pretty good, you know. Yeah. So, you know, and we knew all the stuff. It was the same old standards, My Way, and all the, you know, the Begin, and all the other songs that you had to know to play through this stuff. And we knew them all back to front. We were playing them all the time. On top of that, I also joined what was called the John Muller Big Band, which was a 17, 18-piece big band.
Wow.
Now, I was asked to join the band because the drummer had sort of left town. And they said, they knew I could read. So I said, yeah, I'd come along. And it was fantastic because we were playing Count Basie stuff and jazz standards and
but not only that,
Tommy Dorsey. And
it must be an amazing thing to when you've got like that many horn players playing together. The sound must be
and these
huge.
guys were good players. You know, this band was a really, really good band, very, very tight and very proficient. But to read those charts was very different to reading the cabaret charts, the Dick Buchanan and Bill Barlow charts. These were Count Basie charts and things that were written by Tommy Dorsey and those 50s bands and stuff like this from the swing era. And we're talking about the stuff that Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich used to play.
So it's technically quite difficult.
And Lewis Belson and the accents and stuff, and to read through that stuff, and it was such an invigorating experience, but it was also very challenging because...
Did you learn a lot from that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And you had to lift your... I imagine you would have had to have lifted your game quite significantly.
Brought me into an entirely different level as
Did
a
you
player.
get some time to get yourself to that point, or was it thrown in at the deep end?
No, it was a gradual progression straight up. I was tipped into the deep end, but because I'd played cabaret and I was gig fit because I was playing 5 nights a week.
Yep.
And I was reading all the time. Although when you're reading basic charts, you're really only counting through the bars and watching for the accents and doing the coda to coda, sign to sign stuff, so you know when to stop and start and finish, and if there's segues into other songs and stuff like that. But with the big band, very different thing, because you've got horn solos and all these different players who've got features and piano players, and it's the dynamic range because you have to follow your signatures closely, and there's a lot of different time signatures, 3/4, 2/4, and sometimes the bars will change through 4 time signatures in a 16-bar range. Yeah. However, you get the point, but it's also the volumes you have to play. You have to be able to bring your playing ability right down to a really, really soft level, but still maintain a really high degree of energy. So and brushes and all that sort of stuff. So discipline-wise, it was amazing. And then I had a band. The band at the time was called Little Rock. Which was Merch. Keith Merch was in the band, and Tony Jenkins and Wayne Dufty and Guy Dutton. And they were amazingly good players. These little country town bands are actually very good bands. Because there was such a healthy live industry in these towns. And we played all over the things. In fact, we started touring through Newcastle into Sydney and then up to the Gold Coast, which is how I ended up on the Gold Coast. So this band, over a 4-year period, became very strong in the circuit. We played firstly from Newcastle to the Gold Coast and back down through the circuit, and then do our gigs and the thing like that. We recorded quite a bit of material and that sort of stuff, and And it got to a point where I went to Sydney to meet with the A&R guy from WEA to present the band's tape. I also worked at Parling's music store for 5 years, selling musical instruments, which is another gig on top of the gig that. So I was getting paid good money to do the cabaret 5 nights a week, but I was also working 5 days a week.
How long, when you were doing the cabaret gig, what was involved time-wise with that?
It was basically rehearsal once a week to learn new songs because you had to keep it fresh.
But when you're actually at a gig, so like was it 8 till 11, 9 till 12?
It was 8 till 1.
8 till 1, 5 hours?
Yeah, basically.
And what time would you get up to start at Parling's?
Parling stayed open at 9 o'clock in the morning. So, but I was in my early 20s. It wasn't any big deal. And you'd stay up partying until 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but not five nights in a row.
Oh, no, you couldn't do it 5 nights in a row. No, but, on the weekends, certainly, yeah. But we weren't open, Parling's wasn't open on Sundays. It'd only open half a day Saturday. So you'd get to the gig at 7:30, Sometimes you go through in the afternoon and you run through with the act, but that was only Friday, Saturdays, and you run through with the act. And then you go somewhere and get on the piss and then come back and do the gig. And it was just, you drink all the way through it. You kept yourself going that way. And then in those days, it was pretty strict time. It was 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off.
And that was very strict?
Pretty much strict for the club. And there was no music in between. That's just when everyone just socialised. So there was just a little bit of light background music that was on. And then, of course, the act would come out and do an hour show.
Yep.
So you do an opening set.
Yep.
I'd say people were dining. So it was dinner music.
Yep.
The tables were all set for dining and that sort of stuff, and everyone had settled in. And then you do like a dining set. And sometimes in the club, at the Workies Club, you'd actually go down and play in the restaurant.
Okay.
At 6:30 to, say, 8. Or something like that, or 5:30, and it was lounge music, It was like Murph and the Murph Tones from exactly that sort of
the brushes.
And it was fun,
Yeah.
We could have a bit of fun doing that, and then we go upstairs and move the gear upstairs and do the main show. I actually had 2 kits, so it made it a lot easier than dragging it, pulling it apart and taking it upstairs. And then the act had come on at usually. I think it was 8 o'clock, the main act had come on, the cabaret act, and they do an hour show, plus encores, whatever. If they were a really good act, sometimes they'd be there for an hour and a half.
Okay.
Because, they get, people like Carter Edwards and Normie Rowe and Debbie Byrne and Jane Scarley and people like that, they were really good acts. I mean, and they could really, sort of, they were young, some of them were off young talent time. But they were, they were good days because these guys were great acts, good singers, professional, like you wouldn't believe, very, very professional. So, and then you'd play another 2 sets after that.
Yeah.
So the whole night was pretty much fun.
How long did you do that for before you moved to the coast?
5 years.
Okay. And then what prompted the move to the Gold Coast?
We came up here and we did a week residency at the Tweed Heads Hotel. And we stayed at the Tweed Heads Hotel, and that was a little cockroach high-rise, that was. And it was.
I used to go to the Tweed Heads Hotel.
And it was amazing because you'd play, and it was just a dirty, scungy, smoke-filled, skanky,
wasn't a very big room
dank room, and it was so much fun because, in fact, the lights were so close to your head, those 64 cans used to burn your hair. And
That's why you've got no hair.
Yeah, it'd burn the back of your head, and I'd have to get and turn the can around. And you'd be there and you'd be sweating so much because the room was packed and it was so hot and the sweat was running down your face and you couldn't see because your eyes were stinging.
Actually, that's the strange thing. One of the things I do remember about playing in pubs back in the day, there was no air conditioning and it was in summer especially. Oh, stinking hot.
And you come off stage and you'd be wet. I mean virtually wet. Someone come up and they go, "Hey, how you going, mate?" And they go, "Oh." Yeah, so, especially the girls. The girls go, "Oh."
No, it's sort of that's an interesting. I think about that now because all that virtually doesn't happen in any of the venues I play in.
No, not anymore. No, and loud. And everyone smoked. So you didn't need a smoke machine. It was just. And you were breathing this smoke, and I reckon, I still believe to this day, that's why so many of our good muso mates have died from throat cancer and other related cancers.
From second-hand smoke.
From second-hand smoke in the venues, if they didn't smoke themselves to contribute.
Yeah, because I never smoked, but it was one of those
and
things I always thought about.
And nor have I, and it's always been in the back of my mind because so many guys I know throughout the years, throat cancer was a particularly prevalent thing with musicians and people who worked within the venues, nightclubs as well. And I've, as you know, I've done all that. So we came up and we did, I think it was a week or 2 weeks. We ended up doing 2 weeks, I think. And a couple of guys come in, Johnny Carr and Peter Bolt and stuff, and saw us play. And they approached us and said that Ray Burton was coming back from the States and they were putting a band together around it and they were looking for a rhythm section. Sorry, I'll go back to the A&R guy, I think.
Yeah. That's right, yes.
Sorry. So anyway, he cancels the meeting. So I'd driven all the way to Sydney and he'd cancelled the meeting. And I thought, oh, okay. And a friend of mine was an A&R guy for another record company at the time. So I'm out at the Golden Sheaf Hotel having a game of pool with a group of people that I know, because I got to know a lot of people in Sydney through Parlings, because I worked for Parlings, and also because I'd lived in Sydney before and I knew people, so, and we were all catching up as friends, and they stayed there and risen up through the industry, you know. Pete Hall ended up being one of the head guys in the ABC and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm playing pool and I'm talking to this guy and we're having a good drink together and getting on really well. And he said, I said, so what do you do? I said, I've got a muso from, Tamworth, and I come down to meet up with the A&R guy from WEA and stuff like that. And so I said, he cancelled his point, he had something else on. He said, oh, that's running. He said, I'm that guy. And he took the tape and really liked it. But because the band we'd gone through all those years of building the band up, the same old story, we were sick of it. By the time we got to the point where it might have jumped to the next level, the band was virtually at the point where it was dissolving. Yeah. So, and they all went their own ways, and we were offered the gig with that, and I said to Merch, what do you want to do? And I said, because I loved the Gold Coast. I used to come up and sit on the beach and think that, what am I doing living in Tamworth? It was 40 degrees in summer and 5 degrees below in winter. And, although the town was good to me, and I have cast no dispersions on the town whatsoever in that fact, because I probably had one of the biggest PAs and trucks and 30-can light rigs. I used to hire all my gear out to the country music. It used to be in the Tamworth Town Hall in those days, and they used to use my PA for that.
I guess it's one of those things. If you're earning quite a good income and you're playing all the time, you've got a day job, you've got all these other things going on, that's got to be something that's quite difficult to walk away from.
It was. It was. But to me, to have an opportunity to play with someone of Ray's calibre, to me, was an entirely different level. And I came up and we put the band together, and it was a great band. And we were getting a lot of gigs because of his name. And we were the second headlining act at the big festival that was on at Coffs Harbour. And I think it was, the headlining act was Aussie Crawl. Okay. And then it was Ray Burton Band and a couple of other bands.
Because Ray had quite a large and varied career.
He did some amazing stuff all his career.
Oh, I mean, wrote great songs, played in the executive, formed as Rock. Yep. Back in that particular, back in the 60s and 70s, he was quite a superstar.
And his Dreamers and Night Flyers album was a great album. In fact, Little Rock, the band in Tamworth, used to play one of his songs called Too Hard to Handle. Okay. And then when I joined the band, he said, well, do one of my old songs, Too Hard to Handle. And I just went, yeah, one, clank, clank. And he's got, I said, Merch and I knew the song quite well.
Because I got to play with, the other thing is would know, I got to play with Ray later on.
That's right. That progressed. In fact, we ended up doing a tour with Bo Diddley as well. So a few dates with him and stuff like that. And actually, I actually got to play with Bo. Oh, wow. Because we did the support.
You had to play the Bo Diddley beat.
And he said to me, Bo said, I don't want to hear none of this dunk shit. He said, you play straight through it, dunk. I don't want to hear it's dunk, but don't do that. That was only, I think there was one of about 20 words he actually said to me the whole time. Nice enough guy, but anyway, the Ray Burton thing didn't last very long. By that stage, I was actually running Sound City in the music store in Surfers Paradise. And then I used to...
Was Don
Don Pryor.
Don Pryor. He was the owner.
He owned it, that's
Yep.
right. And that's pretty much when you and I met, because you
Yeah.
hired my PA.
That's right.
But also Rex and Lee, who were working with BJ and stuff and different stuff, also used to hire the PA for their bigger gigs. And I was making pretty good money at it. In fact, I was probably making more money hiring the gig PA than I was making using it myself. So I digress. Another band. So after Ray Burton, I joined a band with Pete Wells, Geordie Leach from Rose Tattoo, and a girl called Lucy DeSoto, and the band was called DeSoto, and it was a really great band. Just
Used to play at the Port of Call.
yeah,
Yeah.
and great feel.
Yeah.
Just amazing band to play with. Because Pete and Geordie were seasoned,
Oh, yeah.
rock musos.
Geordie's still living around on the coast.
Yeah, that's right. And she hates being called Patricia. Oh, Lucy. Lucy, and she actually wrote a rock book about the history of rock and roll as well. So she was playing in the band, and we cut an album, went to number 3 on the alternative charts.
Oh, because Pete was a great guitar player.
Oh yeah, his
His
slide playing was,
Oh,
and the sound
phenomenal.
he used to get. I remember a night we were playing at the Henry Roost Tavern or something in Lismore, and Tommy and Phil Manuel were I knew them quite well because they were from Gunnedah originally.
Yeah.
And I also met them in Sydney when they were with
Gold
Rush, and also in Tamworth, because they were good friends. They grew up living with the Brown family, and I was good friends with the Brown family. So we had an association.
Yeah.
They came into the gig. They must have been playing in the next pub, because in those days Lismore was a great gig. There was every pub had a band. And
I remember when I first started playing Lismore, Lismore was a great town for music.
and
Great
the
town.
Lobster Pot, and
In Ballina, yeah, the Lobster Pot in
and
Ballina.
even Casino.
But there was like the Satellite Room in Lismore, there was the Henry Rouse, there was the Commercial Hotel.
and then there was the club,
the Workers' Club
Workers'
and
Club.
the RSL Club.
And then there was also the was it the Greek Club or the
Yes,
yeah.
yes, the Atello Club.
Atello.
The Atello
That's
Club.
right, yes. Anyway, so Tommy and Phil have come in and they're standing there, and Phil's looking at Pete. Pete's like just ripping this. He's as he does with that slide, but Durry hanging out his gob. And it's sweaty and it's hot and the crowd's going off. And he come up after me. Phil said, "Oh man, that sound." He said, "Wow." So Pete was an impressive player like
Yeah.
that. So
And he was a large human being. It was quite an impressive presence.
yeah, and Geordie, a monster bass player.
Yeah.
He could really lay it down, and so it was good. But we were struggling to make money, and I guess where I'm going next is probably what brought me to my next chapter in my life. I don't know whether this story is correct because I can't remember it, but we're playing at the Lobster Pot in the afternoon, and I'm sure that we were supporting Barnsey when Barnsey was, after he left Chisel, and he was getting his mojo back and starting to do, so we went to the gig, or we either went to the gig or we supported them. I don't remember whether we supported, I think we did. Anyway, and afterwards, of course, Geordie and Pete were friends with Barnsey and stuff like that, and Rob Riley, the Beast, was playing with Barnsey at the time.
Oh, okay.
So after that, we're all sitting around having a pizza and, doing what you do. And I think Rob said, "Oh yeah, Barnsey's playing me $500 a week," which in those days, we're talking about the mid-80s. I thought to myself, so I'm going to get myself to this level, which I probably wasn't far off it at that stage. I was rising through the ranks, I guess it was, whatever that meant. I thought to myself, so I'm going to get to this level and I'm going to tour and I'm going to be on the road and I'm going to get $500 a week, which was pretty good money. But at that stage, I was making $1,000 a week. Because at that point in time, I was working at Sound City, working in the band, and had other things that I was doing. So I came back, and Rex and Lee came and saw me, and they had the residency at the Skyline Lounge in Surfers Paradise.
Yep.
And they offered me the gigs with the Dukes of Earl as a drummer. And it was paying $400 a week, I think. Plus I was getting paid, I think, $400 a week at the time to work at the music shop. And then Tony Condon came in, who was the manager of the Patch, and he was next door in the golf shop, and he came in and he said, talk about getting ducks in a row. And he said, "Oh, mate, we're doing a big renovation on the patch." He said, "We need someone to put some sound system and lighting and stuff in. Can you do that?" And I said, "Well, that's what we do," because we also had Paradise Music Factory.
Yep.
So what I did was join the band there. So I'm working 6 nights a week there. I'm working 5 days a week in the thing, and I'm also now doing a big install into the patch. And they said, and then the patch said, "Well, mate, we need some acts to kick it off. Can you book some bands for us?" I said, yeah, I can do that. No worries at all. So you're talking about a self-prophesizing thing. So all of a sudden I'm making pretty good money.
You're working in a band.
Yep.
You're working in a music shop.
Yes.
And you're hiring PAs.
Yep.
And you're acting as an agent.
That's right. And then I was also doing some promotion at the patch. So, and people don't realise back in those days, on the patch on a Thursday night, we used to sell 20,000 drinks.
Oh yeah, I remember Dollar Nights.
Thursday
Dollar
night.
Nights, people would be lined up around the block to
That's
get
right.
in.
We used to take, on average, $20,000 on a Thursday night. Now, you say dollar drinks, but you've got to remember this is in the 80s.
Mm.
A normal price drink was $2.50. The actual landed unit cost of a spirit then, I think, was about 30 cents. So you're actually still making it round about
The profit was
60%.
phenomenal.
And we were selling moonshine.
Mm.
We used to keep the Jim Beam bottles and the vodka bottles, and for this stuff we used to buy in 20-litre drums, and some of it was like metho. It was just, that's why everyone used to be so sick all the time. It was just, it was bloody moonshine, it really was. But, you know, they used to come in, the dollar drinks, and just, anyway, the venue became so busy, so successful, that they just said to me, "Look, mate, we want you to come work here and do all our promotions and stuff like that." I said, "Well, I don't really want to leave the job up there." And they said, "Oh, no, we don't expect you to do that. We'll just, you know, if you can
Just something extra on the side as well.
Book the bands and come in and look after the venue for night time and that sort of stuff." So I virtually had to leave the Dukes of Earl. Mm-hmm. Which was a great band, by the way. We were touring all over the country, and we were doing the Good, the Bad, the Ugly show with Lee Conway and Alison Durbin and Chad Morgan, and I was working with Col Elliott as well, doing his shows, and we were doing Rock Around the Clock with Dennis Knight. That was basically the band that was backing all those acts, plus doing our own stuff and playing at the Palm Beach Hotel as a Friday night residency and just packing the place out. That's with BJ and Rex and Lee and Dave White and stuff. Great band, voices. And I basically had to make a decision then, which I think at the time was probably the right decision financially, because the music industry was on the way down, because DJs were coming in and the requirement for bands was starting to, it was becoming economically more viable for a venue to hire a DJ than it was to hire a band.
Yeah.
So what I was doing then, also selling sound systems into other nightclubs and stuff like that. In fact, I fitted out transformers in Melbourne and everything with sound systems, things like that.
Was it around that time? Because I remember when I first started gigging, pubs would shut at midnight.
That's right. They were only licensed to midnight.
But they were always, but they'd be packed. Mm. And there must have been a point somewhere around that time where licensing changed and pubs got open later.
Yeah, it was. So nightclubs were allowed, they were called cabarets, that was their licence. And it still pretty much was still a cabaret licence up until just a few years ago. Okay. Now they're just different degrees of licensing types. But in those days, there was a thing called intending diner. You could only have a late night licence if you serve food.
And that's why when you bought a ticket to get into the Jet Club, you got a food voucher.
That's right. And you didn't have to eat the food, but you had to be an intending diner. And they always ask you the question. They come in and say, "Oh, good evening, sir, and you're intending to dine?" And people would say, "No, I've already eaten." "Yes, but you do intend to dine, don't you?" No, I've already eaten." "Well, you can't come in, mate." You know, like, shut up, mate. Work with me here, you know? Yeah. So, and it was the curried chicken or the savoury mince and rice and whatever, and it was always spewed up in the toilet later or in the corner or wherever it was. It was horrible. And look, let me say this, the food was edible, but it was only a couple of choices.
I did eat it myself quite a few times.
and then you went across the road to the pie shop and it topped it off. The patch got so busy they asked me to stay on as the promotions manager. And I used to walk around town handing out passes. And I learnt fairly quickly that in order to get the venue busy, and this is an operational style I used for the rest of my career as a manager in a hotel, was that I always made sure that the girls never paid to get in. So I'd go around all the hairdressers and the offices and stuff and give them all a free pass and say, oh, such and such a band's on tonight. So what I used to do is I used to go to Sydney, fly to Sydney, and these days it was at my expense. And bloody airfares were expensive those days. You know, it was like, it cost you $300 to fly to Sydney. And I used to meet with premier artists and the agencies, and they'd take me around to their venues and show me their hottest acts that were in Sydney. And what I used to do then is I used to bring those acts to the Gold Coast. I'd sell it to them. I'd say, come up to the Gold Coast, play at the Patch for a week. We used to have the flats across the road, which is where Billy Rack used to live, the swamp.
But Mason called it the cave.
The cave, that's right. I used to call it the swamp. They called it the cave. I think the swamp was a better fit. And I'd say to them, you can bring your girlfriends too if you like, and come and have a holiday on the Gold Coast and play at the venue. And in those days, you could play the Hoey Moey and all the venues right through Newcastle all the way up, so you can get a run on the way up and a run on the way back. You know, through Lismore and do the whole thing.
Yeah,
and
I remember there was two circuits. There was one down the coast where you did
Hoey Moey.
Well, Ballina, Lobster Point, the Hoey Moey in Coffs Harbour, and you do Tari RSL,
Tari.
or you could go out through and do Armadale, Tamworth.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the circuit I used to originally do. So, and I had contacts through that whole, and by this stage, because I lived in Tamworth and Sydney, I had this entire network of people.
Yeah, because you've already done that circuit anyway.
That I knew. And everyone that I knew had come up through the industry, and they were all in positions of power, whatever that may be. Anyway, so I used to go there, and also what I used to do through the agencies was book the major acts into the venue. So when they were touring through, I would book through premier artists, whoever it was at the time, Hoodoo Gurus or whoever was playing at the gigs. And so it was working really well. But Sunday night was always a bit of a struggle because the Dolphins Hotel was on fire and all the other pubs were on the fire, the Tweed Heads Hotel and stuff like that. They were sort of getting that afternoon crowd, and I didn't matter what I kind of did, I couldn't.
Which is strange at the Patch, because it's right on the beach, and you would think you get the people off the beach.
I think it's probably because the venue was too big. It didn't have that Sunday afternoon session atmosphere. So what I did was I ended up shutting half the room down. So the venue said to me, I said, look, Ross, what we wanted to offer you, we want to offer you Sunday nights as your night. You can promote the night and you'll get a percentage of the take, and the door is yours. And I thought, well, that's not a bad deal, you know, because and it also gave me the incentive to go out and work harder. And because the Patch was open later than the other pubs like the Dolphins, I think used to close at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. So I went over there and saw old mate, I can't even remember his name now. I said, mate, would you mind me coming in? And he said, oh yeah, mate, that'd be great, because at least I'll piss off out of here. I don't have to try and get him out of the venue, which was a big mistake on his behalf, because I'd started getting people used to going to the Patch. Yep. So eventually what happened...
They just go straight to the Patch and not...
And the thing that triggered it was I had a band from Perth playing at the Patch for the week. And I'll give you the names in a sec. And then there was another band that was rising, and I used to watch the charts, and I watched the bands that were rising through the charts. In those days, major acts or rising bands didn't get paid a lot of money. They were just out to promote their albums and, you know, get a following. In fact, it was the same for all the bands, Cultures and stuff. I used to go through the books at the Jet Club, and they used to get paid $400 or $500 a night.
Wow.
You know.
Wow.
Well, that's what they got. Yeah. But they'd sell the albums.
So if you're talking out of Perth, it would have been a band, either the Boys or Eurogliders or...
No, it wasn't. But the band was out of Melbourne. The major. So what I did was, Hutcho rang me. It must have been Hutcho, or it was Paul that used to work for Hutcho. And he said, I got this band coming through, the great band, mate, good band, rising band. I said, yeah, I know. And they were called Big Pig.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they were great, which is Kate Sobrano's sister. A great band. And they had a single out at the time that was rising called... I can't remember the name. You know the song?
I know the song.
Okay. Anyway, that was rising rapidly through the charts. So I said, look, I can only give you $1,000 for the band. I said, that's all the budget I've got. He said, all right, we'll take it. But in those days, a band would go on tour and they'd have a budget of 20 grand. The agent would buy the band for 20 grand and they'd have to sell them around the venues, door versus. And, Saturday night they might get 5 grand. Friday night they might get 5 grand. Thursday night they might get 4 grand. Sunday night.
They're just making up the
if
numbers
you got
to
a
get
grand
the...
too, but they had to reach that 20 grand mark to make it viable for the... I said, right. But the band that I had in residencies, their name was 87 Fat Girls. Now, the billing on the front of the patch was Big Pig plus 87 Fat Girls. Now, the media got hold of it, that we were being sexist or discriminatory or stuff like that. And they actually come down with cameras and everything and interviewed me.
Best thing that could have happened.
I must have got $100,000 worth of fucking advertising out of it. And
I'm going to tell you a story.
I'm getting the door at $5 a head.
Oh.
1,000 people turned up.
Oh, whoa.
And I paid the band $1,000. so Ross was doing all right, you know. Like, there was all cash in those days. As you know.
Back in the day when I was young, I had a band called I don't know if you remember, Good Home Cooking.
That's right, yeah, a good band.
Yeah, it was a great band. Played a lot of original songs and did a couple of the Battle of the Bands and didn't win, but never mind.
That was questionable, though.
Well, they were like all contests tend to be. There was it's basically a marketing tool for somebody else's project.
Yep.
But they were fun for us, and we did a gig. I remember doing this. We had a band called Good Home Cooking, and there was a band in Lismore called Hungry Young Men.
Yeah, they were good.
Great band. And it was around exactly the same time as there was a band, I think it was out of Sydney, touring band around, called Kids in the Kitchen. So we ended up doing a gig, I think it was at the Kingscliff Hotel, with the headline act was Kids in the Kitchen, supported by Hungry Young Men with Good Home Cooking.
What a
great lineup.
What a perfect lineup. And that's how this one fell apart. It wasn't intentional. It just and by the way, this band from Perth, because the Perth bands are really good. In fact, I was watching a YouTube thing on all the Perth bands from those days, and Dave Warner from the Suburbs and stuff was from it. And because they were at such an isolated community, they had an amazingly strong live venue, and the musos and stuff was if you ever get a chance to watch it, it's very enlightening. Anyway, so I did that, and then Ron McLaughlin owned the patch in those days, but I think he'd overextended himself a bit when he did the renovation and stuff like that. And
that was a big room too.
Yeah, well, what happened was, I think the story was that they turned a rundown old pub, and he built this massive room, which at his own expense, by the way, which is, these days would never happen. And it was a phenomenal amount of money for those days. I think it must have been about $150,000, which was a lot of money then.
And there was a hotel right next, a motel right next door. Because there was always issues with noise.
Yeah, that's Sunsets.
Which is amazing that they could have been a motel next door when you consider Midnight Oil played there, and massive, like bands with, it was a big room, and there was bands with big PAs.
Yeah, the Sunset Strip. But the venue was well soundproofed.
Okay.
Except for its weakest link, where the back of the room, they didn't fucking soundproof it. So it was just an old fibro shed. So whatever you did at the front didn't matter. It was always going to get out the back and through the roof. It was they used the best acoustic tiles, air locks on all the doors, as you remember.
Well, I remember it was one of those things that was big signs on it, do not open the friggin' doors.
And I had a lot to do with the design of all that, because I installed all the systems, the lighting systems, the sound systems, stuff like that. And it was a really good functional room, a great stage and good facilities for the artists and things like that, even showers and toilets, which is virtually unheard of in a lot of venues. Anyway, he lost the venue, and Mark Willoughby, Dempsey Joy, Brian Adams and some other guy, Mitchell, somebody bought it. And, Sydney Smarties that were going to come up there and set the world on fire. Well, they didn't last long in it either. But during that period of time, it was, that's sort of the heyday of the patch. After that, it was they lost it, and then it was rebought and never. It's like everything. Once a venue sort of fails, it's very difficult.
Well, as I was trying to tell someone the other day, it can take 6 months to build a room. You can lose it in
6 weeks.
Yeah, or less.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
And but the problem with this is once you've lost the crowd, it takes a long time to get them to come back.
It can take years. Once the crowd moves, and it's more relevant these days than it ever was then. In those days, as I moved into management, I discovered there was only really two crowds. There's the disco crowd and the live band crowd. And there was your cabaret crowd, which was we called the Blue Rinse set, or the people who went to the RSL clubs. But back in those original days, everyone forgets that all the clubs in town were packed. There was a lot of money in the venues like Seagulls and Twin Towns and all the bowls clubs and stuff.
Was that because of pokies though?
Well, only New South Wales had pokies, so they used to bus loads of people down to the in the afternoons for
Seagulls would do that. They'd have their own bus that could bring people down, and Twin Towns
buses, morning medleys, and then they'd have shows in the afternoon. They'd bingo and all that sort of stuff. And the places were packed with all these old folks that used to come down and have all these free shows. And that's when we used to play too. We were all doing afternoon shows. It was nothing to do 3 shows on a Sunday afternoon or 2 shows on a Sunday. So the money in the industry, once Queensland put the pokies in, all that dried up because prior to that the money wasn't coming from the people they were bringing in, because they were pretty much old people fundamentally. The money was coming from all the people that worked in the clubs. So all those staff, and you can imagine there was hundreds of them, all getting tips and all making money, and they were all young girls and young guys that when they finished work at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, they were coming out. And that's why you had, like Coolangatta had 5 or 6 or 7 venues working 5 or 6 nights a week, because the big nights in town were Monday night, was industry night. You could be playing there and you'd be playing to 5 or 6 or 700 people.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was still going on in the late 90s, 2000s. I was doing gigs. I had a residency at the Sugar Shack in Surfers. And our residency was Thursday, Sunday, Monday. And Mondays were huge. Because everyone else who was working in the industry, that was their night off, and they'd come and...
Industry night, and when I had nightclubs in Surfers Paradise, well, the same thing. Then the discos became more prevalent and that sort of stuff. So the venues were just using DJs on the nights, on the weeknights and stuff like that, and still getting reasonably good crowds and not having to spend the money on the bands. And then noise became a problem, because all these big touring acts started destroying it, because they were bringing in massive rigs and running at 120 dB, and the percentage really wasn't there. And as I moved into management, I discovered that you could have a resident band and you could have a DJ and you'd have a great night. So you might have 500 people in the room, but the money you took, because in those days people would drink 10 drinks. Now they'll drink 2 or 3, if at best. But 10 drinks, well, we used to average amount
at this
of about
stage
10
had
drinks.
drink driving laws come in?
No, not all that. Or they were kind of just coming in, but people didn't.
Because their industry has, in a lot of ways, had the death of 1,000 cuts.
Oh yeah, and
it's like that thing happened and that thing happened and
absolutely. But my experience with bands like, I used to have bands like Midnight Oil and Noiseworks and stuff play at the Patch. They'd come in of an afternoon and they'd virtually take over the venue and demand this and demand that, and and not complying with the noise regulations and keeping the fire doors open, and just roadies. Roadies did an amazing job, but some of their attitudes at times was just difficult to deal with, and I wasn't a person that would tolerate it, because they couldn't pull the wool over my eyes.
Because you'd been there
and done all that. Don't give me your bullshit, mate. So I used to say, you need to turn it down, and they pulled down a slider that faded. So I said, not that one, this one here, mate. And they'd say, and I said, otherwise I'll just have to pull the plug on you. And I did on quite a few acts. Because, it was that.
It's not worth you, not worth losing your licence.
Or the venue's licence. So, and then, of course, at the end of Midnight Oil, you'd have 2,000 people in the room. Well, they'd want to start pulling all their road cases in and stuff like that and putting them all over the dance floor. So no one could dance, so everyone just leave and go to another venue. So I just lost, a shitload ton of money. So I started working out that it was actually more economical to have 500 people and have a resident band and the DJ and no interruption than it was having a major band on who were taking all the door money anyway, and you weren't getting 5 cents out of it. And, you know, you're only getting really 2 hours of drinking time as opposed to 6 hours of drinking time.
Mm-hmm.
So people would come in at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night and stay till midnight, and they drink the whole time. But if you had a major band on, the doors were closed until you opened the doors, and then they came in. There was about half to an hour of drinking before the band came on. During the band time, no one drank much because they were watching the band and dancing. And then after the band finished, everyone just left because the roadies would come in and roll all the cases onto the floor. Basically make it not very much fun to be in there.
Yeah.
So, and turn the lights on because they wanted to see what they were doing and all that. So ruin the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. So I learned fairly quickly that that was not sustainable, and that's, I think, was a big contributor to the demise of the big, you know, what I call them now dinosaur rock rooms.
Yeah.
From the patch, I was headhunted to go and manage the Jet Club, which I did right till, you know...
That was a great venue.
Till its last day. And in fact, I made it a little bit more contemporary too, and, you know, I sort of bought some old theatre seating and stuff like that, put cage fences in, and it's got a bit like that Transformers thing, and it sort of took the sort of edge off. And I did that until the venue closed, and then I guess after that I moved into managing nightclubs.
Because then you went to Hill Street.
No. Yes, I did. No, I went to Townsville.
Oh yeah, the pub.
Right, because I was head on
at
at
the
Criterion. The Criterion Hotel in Townsville and the Bank nightclub. And you used to play there.
I did.
And they were good days.
They were.
The meaty bites or the mighty bites or the meaty bits.
That's what you used to call
I
the
do.
band.
I used to change the sign every night.
You're a cheeky bastard.
It was a mighty bite, and then there's the meaty bites. Oh, the meaty bits.
Oh dear.
Or mighty might.
Mighty Mouse.
You used to get a bit annoyed about that.
Yeah,
well, it's all supposed to be a bit of fun, but, you know, the bands used to tour through there, and I was in Townsville for a few years, and then I came back to manage Hill Street nightclub. And then we bought the Rose and Crown in Surfers Paradise.
Another great venue.
Then Ron McLaughlin had bought it and lost it. Bit of a pattern there. But...
because Ron's son was in there managing and probably drinking the bar dry.
Oh, yeah, you know, probably not. Anyway, we won't get into that. Anyway, I bought it for nothing. It was in receivership, and so the receivers basically sold it to us. I think it was $100,000. But it was a mess. It was the ceiling tiles were falling out, nothing worked, nothing had been maintained and stuff. Anyway, you know, we lost a fair bit of money before I turned it around.
Because it was an interesting venue because it was a little bit out of the way. You had to go in and go up.
And that was a big part of the challenge, was getting people to go upstairs.
Yeah.
But once we established the market and became a real niche market, and which leads me into another part of the whole nightclub thing. See, the Townsville was the same thing, a disco or rock. You had a nightclub where they went to the pub and they watched the bands, and it used to rage. And in Townsville, in the Criterion, we'd take 30,000 over the bar on a Friday afternoon and 20,000 on a Sunday afternoon. And
it was a big venue though,
yeah,
too.
Massive venue.
The big outside area. It was a great venue.
Big beer garden, that sort of stuff. And then once I got into running venues in Surfers Paradise, I noted that the crowd was starting to fractionalise. So there was your nightclub people and there was your live band people. Then there became the dance market, and then the dance market started to fractionalise into house, heavy house, trance. And then, of course, the pingers become popular, which destroyed the drinking. Everyone was just drinking water and taking pingers. And that had a big impact on the industry for quite a while. It seems to have abated, as far as I can tell these days, but it was basically, that's what was just happening. So then from there I went to the beer garden. I managed the beer garden.
Surfers Beer Garden?
Yeah.
Because that would have been before Woolworths bought it.
That's right. Yeah.
When it was still a great venue.
Yeah. I was managing that, and then the beer garden, I managed that. I went for the beer garden to Billy's, and then I went to the Rabina Tavern. I managed the Rabina Tavern. In fact, I added them up. I've actually run 20 venues.
Wow.
In my management career before my retirement. My last job was the Surfers Paradise Surf Club, which, I'm pretty proud of that, because I turned that round from pretty much a basket case to pretty much a thriving venue these days. And as you know, you sort of
Yeah,
played there
that's a good-
yourself, you know. And
Yeah.
I always maintained that one of the things I suppose I brought to the table was, because of my musical background, I always ensured that the musicians who played in my venues were treated with respect, kindness, professionally, and
Yeah.
otherwise ensured that, and they were always
And that
paid.
it does make a big difference.
And always had to be paid in a timely manner. In fact, I treated the musos like staff. They had to be paid in the same respect as staff within 7 days.
Yeah.
And that was important to me.
Yeah.
And I also demanded that of any agent. I said, any agent that brought a band into my venues, that band had to be paid within 7 days of me paying the agency.
Yeah.
Or I said, I will pay the band directly and you can get your fee out of them, because I won't tolerate it. And as we know, some of the agents...
Well, some of them like to hang on to their money and go, oh, it's a 30-day account or a 60-day account, and
no
even
such-
got to the point with some of them where it was a 90-day.
Well, that's insolvent
It is.
trading.
It's
And I had to remind
terrible.
a couple of them at times, I said, you're trading insolvently. I said, would you like me to rattle that cage for you? Or you pay these bands? I said, I don't care what you do with other venues, doesn't really bother me. But when you're dealing with the acts who play in my venues, they have to be paid within a timely manner or I won't use you. I can source them directly, or I'll pay them directly, or I'll source them from somewhere, other acts from somewhere else, because, you know, there's still quite, you know how hard it is to get work these days.
Oh, yeah.
And people who I had relationships with, like yourself, over many years, I always tried to ensure that, you know, I could give you work where I could dole it out, whatever venue that might be. And there's been a lot of them, so. And, you know, as you know, I was retired 2 years ago. And
If you were 18 again and you had to start over today,
knowing what I know now,
knowing what you know now, would you still go into the music industry?
100%, yeah, absolutely. And but given hindsight, I would probably been a lot more successful because I would have already learnt those lessons that I learnt. Because one thing you learn in the music industry is the best lessons you learn are the ones that cost you the most money.
Sometimes take time, and then by the time has passed, it's too late to go back and get that time back.
And to a certain degree, to a lot of the degree, I was actually on or ahead of the game, but there came times where I was actually behind it, so I was actually catching up. And sometimes you've got to realise that you've got to pretty seriously change what you're doing, or you're not going to survive, you know. So.
Of all the varied things that you've done, what gave you the most amount of pleasure?
Oh, definitely being in rock bands on the circuit, but even the cabaret days, they were really good. Just in generally playing music during that period of time, up until I stopped playing, which was really just on the coming into the 90s. I decided I wasn't going to play anymore.
That was the Dukes of Earl decision when you left
After
there?
I left the Dukes of Earl, and I'd ceased to play.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, as you know, I've sort of played in Rock Salt. The band also work with Corey Hargraves. We do festivals and we do, you know, parties and functions and wherever he's got gigs that requires my assistance, which are fun gigs with Ian Bell. But we also did the Rock Salt stuff.
And this is a current thing that Ross is doing.
That's right, which
Yes.
I'm doing right now.
So you've come back around full circle, and
Yeah, I've come back round. I've come back round full circle. But the difference is now I actually don't have to do it for money anymore. In fact, I don't. It doesn't matter whether I get paid or I don't get paid. It's nice to get the money, sure, and when it's there, I take it. But I don't do it for that reason anymore. I do it simply because I really enjoy it. That the most enjoyable thing is that I have my drum kit set up at home, which is the TD50X, which is
the electric kit,
the electronic kit, which is an amazing instrument because I can sit there and flail away without bothering anyone much, because in the headphones it sounds amazing.
Yep.
And I've got all the backing tracks that are played by some of the best musos in the world, and I can now spend up to 2 hours a day, which I do, playing the kit. So my gig fitness level is actually coming up to an entirely different level, and I can actually play things now that I probably would never have been able to play. And when I refer to that stuff, I'm talking about some of that Steely Dan stuff and that Bernard Purdie and Jeff Porcaro and Steve Gadd drum parts that that I spent many hours learning, but there would have been a time in my earlier life where I simply wouldn't have had the technical ability, or probably the mental ability to be able to grasp what they were actually doing. Because these days you can watch it
There's
and
so
watch
much,
what they're doing.
There's so much great material
And
out there to learn.
You can get charts of it, and I can
Yeah.
read those charts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know, so I upload charts, and I can put the chart on my iPad, and I can actually read the chart, and that's again is also bringing that original
skill back as well.
because you don't actually forget it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I've got another project which you met Sam tonight when we're working with Samantha and that sort of stuff. Where that goes, well, let's hope it does something, because I think she's an amazing artist, Samantha Dan. But we'll see where it goes. And look, I'm no spring chicken, as we all, you know. But I'm probably in a better space mentally now than I have been since I was probably in my early to mid 20s, energy-wise.
Yep.
Mentally and spiritually, and I think the spirituality has a lot to do with it. You have to enjoy life, and I wake up every morning very thankful. I appreciate that I've been through years and years of really late nights and running venues.
Not to bring you down, but what would you say have been the hardest times to get through for you?
The years of working, you know, really late nights, running really big venues like the Beer Garden and Billy's Beach House and places where you're working, you know, 16, 17-hour days. And although there's some great stories from those days and funny things, it had a huge impact on my health.
Yep.
At one stage I got to 115 kilos. My wife completely disliked me.
Yep.
As a human being, and I can't say I blame her. I'm not even sure the kids were that fond of me because I really wasn't around enough.
Yep.
Just, you know, drinking too much, eating bad food, and just living a really basically unhealthy lifestyle. It was almost like a trap.
Yep.
You know, you got involved in it and you're drinking, and you'd intend to come home and see the family and think, right, I'm at the door, and then, you know, Billy had come in, the owner, and say, oh, do you want a drink? And then, you know, then all of a sudden, you know, because I live in Coolangatta, I couldn't come home. And I had a room upstairs. I'd have to ring her up and say, oh, look, I'm sorry,
You've had too much?
I've had too much to drink and it's not worth the risk. And she obviously, you know, wouldn't talk to me for 2 days or whatever it might be. But and I don't blame her for any of it. You know, it was just, they could be dark times.
Yep.
And you know, everything else that came with that was things. Well, there was good aspects to it. It wasn't all doom and gloom, but you know, it had a grave impact on my body. And how I actually fixed that was, I decided I had to do something about it. And because I could only run venues, that's all I knew how to do anymore. I actually took a job in Dysart, out in the mines, to run the Jolly Collier Hotel.
Yep.
And I went out there, and I was out there for 9 months, and I dropped 25 kilos and got reasonably fit again, to the point where I am sort of now, and I'm 67 now, so this year, where I'm sort of fitter than I have been in a long, long time, and feeling really good.
So I was going to say to you, what is it that you do now to maintain your health and do the things that you want to do?
I don't drink anywhere near the alcohol I used to, because alcohol's really bad for you, no matter what anyone says to you, it's really bad for you. I've always eaten a pretty healthy diet, and because cooking is a little passion of mine, but I go to the gym every day.
Okay.
I walk most days 5K. When it's not freezing cold, I swim every day. So those three things, I generally get up in the morning, I'll go for a swim in the surf, I'll go for a walk or one of those things, and then after that I'll go to the gym. I might go in the afternoon. I eat very, very good food, only pretty much because, all the positive thing about all those years of doing all those hours is it actually made me reasonably well off. And because I could buy property at the time when it was cheap, and, although asset rich, cash flow poor as you are, when you don't work anymore. But the thing is that, and I also fast 2 days a week.
Okay.
And I'm going to fast right at the moment.
Okay.
So what I do is, for 2 days a week I don't eat. I just drink water.
So it's like a full 48-hour fast?
48-hour fast.
Every week?
Every week. And during that period of time I drop 3 or 4 kilos.
Wow.
It gets rid of all the fluid
Yep.
out of your system. So all I do is drink water. People have got different ideas about it. So it's called the 5-2. I've since shed 15 kilos
Wow.
because I put the weight back on when I went back into the surf club. There again, socialising, eating the wrong food, eating chips and steaks and sauces, and socialising and having lunches with potential sponsors. It's all part of the game.
Oh yeah.
So and so I've returned my body back to the health that I had when I first went out to Dysart. So I've got back to that thing. The fasting is really from my point of view, I need strength training.
Yep.
Because another part of my life story is when I was quite young, I was an athlete. So I've got pretty good muscle memory, and it comes back fairly quickly. And anyone who knows that, who's ever run or been a footballer or a runner or anything like that, or some form of athlete, knows that you come back pretty quickly. But the fasting is really the thing.
Do you find the fasting easy, or is it a hard?
The first day is difficult.
Yeah.
But the second day, once you've got to reach ketosis, what they call ketosis, which means your body starts to feed on itself, which is feeding on the fluid and the fat. And then you stop being hungry. In fact, I've fasted for up to 10 days straight.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Wow.
You do that, you drop 10 kilos.
Wow.
But most of it's fluid.
Yep.
But after that 2 days, you've got to ease back into it. You just can't go and go, oh, beauty, I'll get us a bottle of red, a 300-gram steak. Oh, you start with avocado, and you've got to be careful that you don't set off an insulin response when you're coming back out of a fast, because that's the danger. Because then if you spike your insulin, you've basically everything you've done has just been a total waste of time.
Yeah, they'll do it. I understand
and
all
you
about
know
that because I'm a type 1 diabetic.
You know that perfectly well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest someone like you to fasting, although they believe it's very good for diabetics.
I do a thing. I do the 16/8, which is 16 hours fasting and eat only over an 8-hour window, and I probably have 2 meals a day.
Yeah,
so I'll have breakfast / lunch at 1 o'clock, and then I'll have dinner 7 or 8 o'clock.
And how are your energy levels?
They're about the same as they always have. They haven't. I can't say that they've improved, but the other thing that I believe is a big factor is getting a good amount of sleep. And that's one of the areas that I need to work on. I tend to push the envelope a little bit, trying to fit in stuff, just trying to fit in a lot of things. I'm working in a live band, I'm running a recording studio, I'm doing the podcast. There's a lot of, and I'm trying to have a normal life in between, doing all of those things as well.
I'm going to digress here a little moment. So this is something that I practice. I've always been a naturally spiritual person, driven from a very early experience when I was quite young. However, I have very lucid dreams. In fact, they could actually be called astral travelling. And I've made a practice of, when I go to bed, putting myself into a state where I go and visit. I've got friends in other realms and other people that I go and meet up with and catch up with, and we have lovely times together. And I go to I've travelled all around the world. In fact, the reality is you can go, in your subconscious mind, you can travel anywhere in the universe if you knew where you wanted to go. That's the thing. That for me is where I draw the source of a lot of my energy.
Okay.
Because when I go to bed, I consciously put myself into a mind state where I think, okay, when I do this, I go into a happy mind state and I feel free. And I find I fall asleep incredibly quickly. I'm just gone. And I don't wake up until about 3 in the morning. Which we have to get up at that time of the morning, us old folk. But I go back.
We don't need to elaborate why.
No, but I go back to sleep, and I generally, in summertime, I'm up at 4:30 in the morning or 5 in the morning. Generally, once the sun rises, I'm awake, and that's when I go to the beach and swim and do stuff. It's not for everybody, and a lot of people think it's all nonsense and stuff like that. But all these things I find, since I've got myself back into this spiritual mindset where I'm grateful, then I found that I'm in a much nicer place for the people around me, but also for myself. I'm very happy.
Would you say that it's a form of meditation?
Oh, absolutely. It is a type of meditation that you do. In fact, I've met some rather interesting characters. I've even had a conversation with the devil.
Wow. How did that go?
Pretty good, actually. Yeah. A lot better than I expected.
What was the outcome?
It was sort of a challenge, and I said, look, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. Forget about it, you know. All my life I've been an atheist, pretty much, because I could never really get my head around, they always say, oh, God is everywhere and, you know, and knows everything that goes on. I went, yeah, right, you know, and all the other stuff that goes with it. I've got into a thing, and it basically goes back to pre-Egyptian times with Thoth, or he was known as Mercury, or known as also Hermes Trismegistus. There's a book called the Kabbalion, and it's basically, there's seven hermeticism, seven hermetic principles. And if you watch the Harry Potter movies, it's all about hermeticism and magic and all that sort of, and the occult and all that sort of stuff. And it's evil, and it's not. It was actually the original basis of where all most of the religions came from anyway. In fact, there's quite strong evidence that Jesus was a meticist and was also met Thoth and was in Egypt for a period of time and stuff like that, you know. And I'm sure I'm going to get held down for all this stuff, but it is what it is. But the seven principles of the Hermetic stuff is as above, so below, which is a simple principle, which I always understood even as a young child. The pendulum swings to the left as much as it swings to the right. That's another principle. So you'll see bad times and we saw good times. In fact, if you look at the history of the Earth, the pendulum swings backwards and forwards for the Earth. It also swings backwards and forwards for the human race. But the major principle is that the all is mind, the universe is mental, which means that translates to basically how you want to believe it. But we live in the mind of the all. God is the all-pervading energy that we all exist inside of, which is the principle that God knows everything, because we live in the mind of the all. The universe is mental. Our mind is nothing more than a microcosm of what the universe is. And as we get into quantum physics, they're actually starting to discover that it's all correct, that we actually are living in a conscious universe. In our conscious mind. And if you match your human brain up and take it down to its cellular level and you put it alongside the cosmos, they look identical. So our brain is... So we create our own little existence in our own mind, but we exist inside the mind of the all. And if you read the seven principles, and I implore anyone to read them, because I've read, you know, I've tried to enlighten myself as much as I can through Indian spiritualism, Buddhism, and stuff. But this one kind of captivates me because it's a very, very principled situation where there's no such thing as hot, there's no such thing as cold. It's all just a degree of where it is. It's either there's no such thing as dark or light. It's either a degree of light. It's either very light or it's that way. It's just where you sit on the scale and how you perceive it to be. Where does heat start and cold begin? How far up the scale or how down the scale? Same as light and dark, same as good and evil. You can't have one without the other.
That's true.
You know, so you can have extremely good and extreme people do evil things. Synchronicity is another thing. There's no such thing as coincidence. It's all meant to happen exactly the way it does.
Well, at that particular point in juncture, I'd say thank you very much, Ross.
No, you're welcome.
It's been wonderful having a chat to you.
Yeah, you too. And thanks for inviting me along, man. It's been really good.
You've had quite a varied existence and you've made some interesting choices and decisions to get you where you are. And they've actually worked well for you.
They have.
You're in financially a great place.
Yep. I'm certainly happy where I exist right now. I have a wonderful family and a wonderful wife, and very, 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 very grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ross.
Yeah. Thanks, Scotty.
No worries. All right. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks for tuning in and watching.